Hanifin is up, and Tanev is up, and Zadorov is up. So it's going to be a pure chaos, I think, if this team is not a playoff team come the trade deadline.
Oh, I hope, honestly, for Toronto's sake, that they're out of it so that Brad Treliving can go to their decor and just pick the piece he wants. Whoever it is on an expiring contract, come on over to the Maple Leafs because their decor is solid, man.
You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah!
Good evening and welcome to episode 180 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne, all three of us back together for this one. Hope you enjoyed the data draft episode last week with Kenny. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts and on our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Fellas, the summer came and went, but it's certainly been a good one. Hope you guys are doing well, and it's great to be chatting with you tonight. How are we doing?
Doing good. Yeah. The long weekend is always that measurement of the summer ending, and it's always sad for me, but it's also when the switch is flipped in my brain and hockey mode turns on and I'm like full hockey craze right now. So it's a good time of the year. How you doing, Chad?
Yeah, definitely. Doing well. I was actually in Collingwood this weekend, Case. Went to that area and just went to some cute restaurants and did a nice little staycation a little bit with Paige. So that was good. Went to the spa and that was a much needed rest and relaxation. And then in terms of the long weekend in general and the switch from, summer to fall, it would seem that, this weekend would normally be that turning point, but this weekend was so hot. Like, it seems like it's the dead of summer. And Harper mentioned before we started, getting back from his trip down south, that it was the exact same temperature down in Curacao to here when he landed. So just insane. But yeah, hockey's right around the corner. Fantasy hockey is right around the corner. So like Harper mentioned, if you haven't already, make sure you listen to that episode we did last week with Kenny from Data Draft. He's just amazing. All things fantasy hockey. But yeah, in general, just ready for the season to start up and ready for these next 4 episodes, these predictions and rankings, because they're some of the most fun episodes of the year, and I think you'd both agree.
Yeah, definitely. Our division previews, we're going to be starting with the Pacific Division, but before we get to that, Chad, you have another little game that we're going to play to kind of kick things off, so take it away.
Yeah, okay, so I want to go to Casey first and then Harper. I want you both to rank blindly these next 6 jerseys that I mentioned. So first I'm going to go to Casey. Where do you rank between 1 and 6 the Colorado Avalanche home jerseys?
Ooh, I like those jerseys a lot, and I'm always worried putting them number 1 right away in a blind ranking because I don't know what's coming, and there's a lot of jerseys I like in this league, so I'll put Colorado number 2.
All right, Harper, where do you rank the Arizona Kachina away jerseys, 1 to 6?
Oh, geez. Well, those Kachina jerseys are beautiful. I think we all are fans of those, and you guys know how much I love them. So, but for the sake of other ones coming up, I'll go 3 for those.
Okay, so 2 and 3 off the board. Going back to Casey.
If you put the away jerseys number 1, I would have left the
hot take. I think I actually like the white Kachinas now more than the dark ones. I know that's a hot take, but just it's something with my brain. I do really like them. Going back to Casey now, Smashville Predators home. 2 and 3 are off the board.
I'm probably gonna put them 5. I'm not a huge fan. I can see the appeal. It's just something about yellow being viciously in my face as a color. So I put them pretty low. I'm putting it at 5.
Yeah, I think that's a safe place to put them, if I'm being completely honest. Not many people love that color, despite it being a great place to watch a game, apparently. Harper, San Jose Sharks home. Where are you ranking that? 2, 3, and 5 are off the board.
Ooh. Man, those teal jerseys are gorgeous. It's just so hard to know what else is coming. But I mean, they are up there in terms of best sweaters in the league. So, I guess have to put them at 4 just to see what else comes. So yeah, we'll put them down.
Wow, they better be good jerseys coming. I would have put San Jose number 1 for sure. I love the logo, let alone the like actual jerseys and colors.
Yeah, that's a bold pick. I guess Harper's hoping that a great jersey is coming up, maybe an original 6 team or 2. So we've got 1 and 6 left wide open, Casey. And the jersey I'm sending to you is the Carolina Hurricanes away jersey.
Okay, 6.
Any explanation?
I can think of 10 or 20 jerseys that I like better than that, especially it being the away jersey. If it was Carolina's home, I'd have to think a little more, but I'm still probably putting it number 6. It's just nothing special. And I think there's so many really good jerseys out there.
Yeah, I hear you. So that means, Harper, your number 1 jersey in the entire league is the Washington Capitals away. How do you feel about that being number 1?
Oh my God! If it was the Eagle, like the black Eagle jerseys that they went back to, sure, that would be fine. But just the Capitals away jerseys, that's really, oh man, that
would
sucks.
be number 6 probably, but
yeah, that's not what you want at number 1, that's for sure.
Yeah, no. At least flip San Jose and that one in there.
Yeah, exactly. I would like San Jose's and Colorado's and Arizona's, the ones that we mentioned, would all be ahead of those ones, but I guess that's the way the game goes. So
that's the nature of the game.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Well, that was a fun way to start it, and of course we're gonna do silly little games like that every week to kind of start off the episodes. So anyway, boys, let's get into our first division preview, and this is gonna be about the Pacific Division. We've done this for quite a few years now. We always start with the Pacific in the West, and so we'll go through 1 through 8 here. And what do we want to do? Do we want to go top to bottom, I guess, to do it? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
seems to make the most sense. So anyway, Case, we'll go to you first and get your first team off the board.
What's up, guys? Thanks for making it this far into the podcast. We hope you're enjoying the show so far. I just want to let you know that we're still doing a limited time merch drop over on boysinthebooth.com/shop. We're selling t-shirts, long sleeves, hoodies, crew necks, sweat shorts, slides, you name it, we're selling it at boysinthebooth.com. So head over there and check it out when you can. Every single purchase allows us to improve the quality of our podcasts going forward. Plus, you get to wear some awesome gear too and support the boys. So we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. This podcast is sponsored by Liquid IV. Whether you're staying active or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. Just 1 stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. There's plenty of awesome flavors, but my personal favorite is lemon lime. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth at checkout. That's 20% off anything in the store when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth. Experience better hydration today with Liquid IV. This podcast is sponsored by the best ticket app out there, SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. So click the link down below to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek.
Yeah, usually we're kind of moaning and groaning that we have to do the Pacific Division, but we kind of mentioned before we started recording, this might be the most interesting this division's ever been. I think, I don't know, I could flip-flop on 1 to 3, and I could flip-flop 4 to 7, no problem here. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to put Vegas as my number 1. They just won the Cup. They didn't really have any major subtractions other than maybe Riley Smith, but I think they've replaced him in a number of different ways already on this team. Barbashev being his true replacement, and he was phenomenal when he came over in the trade, and he was excellent in the playoffs, got himself a contract extension, and he's going to be my player to watch on this team going forward. I've actually wrote down a player to watch on every single team. So Barbashev, mark him down. This is one of the top 5 D-cores in the league. There's 3 studs on this team, and it's fun to watch them play. Then there's the depth scoring. This team only gets better every single year at depth scoring. They're really a score by committee team. Like, I think Jack Eichel led with 67 or 60 something points last year. So it'll be interesting to see what he puts up with a full season. But really just a team where you're going to get scoring from all over the place, kind of like the Seattle Kraken that we'll talk about later. So I like this team. They had some pretty mediocre special teams last year despite having a really good season. So if they could just increase their special teams in the slightest, then this team's going to be even better. The only real question for me is goaltending and Mark Stone. Goaltending, you know, they're 2 guys that are not established that really led this team in goaltending last year, and we always mention goaltending is voodoo. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen here. They had a couple guys leave the net, you know, Quick and Brassard are gone now. So I'm just curious to see what's going to happen with goaltending. I think it's going to play a big impact on this team. And then Mark Stone, if he can stay healthy, that's going to be so crucial for Vegas.
Yeah, health will definitely be a concern again this year for Vegas. I feel like that's been the story of their franchise since they came into the league, just being able to stay healthy. And not last season, but the year prior, they missed the playoffs, and it was largely due to the fact that they weren't healthy. Last year, of course, we all know that they went on to win the cup, but it wasn't without, you know, some health scares and you know, some trials and tribulations throughout the season and in the playoffs in terms of health. So that'll always be a concern for this team, I feel like, until they go a different way and rebuild in you know, however many years, if they even choose to do that. They're such a crazy franchise. Maybe they don't follow the traditional route. But yeah, I don't have a problem with Vegas at number 1, Casey. You mentioned that you have 3 teams that you could sort of slot in that top 3 and you would be okay with any of them. I think we have the same 3 teams. I'm willing to bet that we do. And that's why I don't have a problem with Vegas at number 1. I like Edmonton quite a bit. I like LA quite a bit. But I think Vegas, you know, coming off 111 points, winning the Stanley Cup, their only real subtraction being Riley Smith, and essentially, like you mentioned, they replaced him with Ivan Barbashev, who came in at the deadline. They're looking scary top to bottom once again. And in terms of goaltending, you know, they have Hill, they have Thompson, and there's a big question mark also around Robin Lehner. Who knows if he's going to play again this year? I don't know if he's healthy or you know, apparently he needs the money. There was that story that broke a few months ago about his snake farm and how he's broke now. So I don't know what is exactly going to go on between the pipes for this team, but we've sort of realized that, you know, goaltending is extremely random and it kind of doesn't matter as long as your goalie's hot in the playoffs. So I don't have a problem with Vegas at number 1. That's not exactly who I had at number 1, but I would definitely be willing to concede. Harper, what do you think?
Yeah, personally, I don't have Vegas number 1 in this division like you, Chad. I have the Edmonton Oilers, but I could see the defending Stanley Cup champs finishing first in this division for sure. I think the goaltending will be very interesting. It'll be a good, you know, kind of open competition or an open battle, between Hill and Logan Thompson getting back and being healthy, who looked very good for them for a long stretch of time this past season. And for the most part, the band is back together, like you guys said, and everybody is locked up on pretty reasonable deals. And so they could certainly run this back again. Now, with Mark Stone, I do think that for the rest of his career, he's probably not going to be an 82-game player and will miss some time in the remaining seasons that he has left. But but this team does have the depth that they can withstand him being out for periods of time here and there, I do feel like, but he is such a big part of this team, and when he's in the lineup and healthy, he is such a factor. But everybody's back for the most part. It's just Riley Smith that's out the door, like you guys mentioned. This team is a powerhouse, and first or second, they could be in this division. I've got them second personally, but I don't mind them being picked in first by Case at all.
Well, Case, what about Edmonton? Where do you have them in your rankings? Because Harper and I both have Edmonton at number 1, not Vegas. So I'm interested to hear an argument for Vegas over Edmonton.
Edmonton was one of the 3 teams I mentioned. Actually, LA was the third, so you were right there.
Yeah.
And I did have Edmonton at number 2. This team, they solved the depth scoring issue. They solved the goaltending issue for the most part. Failed to solve the D problem, in my opinion. The D core is still just mediocre at best. You have, a very overpaid Darnell Nurse being your number 1 defenseman, and then Evan Bouchard as your kind of only offensive defenseman in this lineup. I like the add of Ekholm last year, but there wasn't really any pizzazz to that one at the end of the year or in the playoffs. So I think this team's really lacking the D core, and it's going to be another season of they better outscore the opponents. It's going to be pretty easy when you have 3 100-point scorers on one team and the best player in the world who's probably going to put up 150 points this year. But another thing that I was taking into consideration when I was looking at the 2 teams side by each, I was looking at them and I was thinking Vegas was unreal last year with poor special teams. I think they were like 18th and 19th in power play and penalty kill. Edmonton Oilers had maybe one of the best power plays ever since they started tracking the stat. And I just have to expect that is going to come back a little bit. I don't know if you can sustain 30+% on the power play despite having Draisaitl and McDavid. So that was kind of something I took into consideration. And then just wondering if Stuart Skinner is going to be able to play 50+ games again to pick up the slack for Jack Campbell. So I just had more question marks about on the Edmonton side than I did Vegas. Vegas, I really have no questions other than goaltending, and that we've already accounted for as doesn't matter. So both these 2 teams are really good, and they're going to be near the top of the league, let alone the top of this division. But I just see Vegas having the edge.
Yeah, fair enough. When I look at Edmonton, I kind of thought the same thing as you. The number 1 concern was the D core. Although they added Ekholm, he essentially just replaces Tyson Barrie on that back end, which we do love because Ekholm is a 2-way guy. He makes a great first pass. He can move it up the ice without giving up too much in the way of defense. So that was a great add, and I think that really stabilized their blue line. The reason that I don't think their blue line is as bad as people say anymore is because you're expecting Bouchard to take yet another step this season. He'll be the number 1 quarterback on the number 1 power play in the league, and he'll be able to take some steps defensively. You would hope so as well. There's also another guy who we've barely seen in the NHL at all, Philip Broberg. I don't know if it's his time to step in and be a mainstay on this blue line, but that would be intriguing to see as well. Up front, you can definitely expect some regression with this team, in terms of a guy like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He's never going to score 100 points again in his career. I would be willing to put some money on that. But that being said, they did add a guy like Connor Brown, and a guy last year who only played half the season was Evander Kane. So I feel like their offense might actually even be better than it was last season, even though one of their players who got 100 points is likely to regress by quite a bit. And then in net too, talking about regression and things regressing back to the mean, I think there's not a world in which Jack Campbell is as bad as he was last year. And if he is, they'll make a trade and they'll bring in someone else. So those are my arguments as to why I think Edmonton could be better than Vegas. It has nothing to do with Vegas being bad or Edmonton being extremely good. I think they're both really good teams, going to be at the top. I mean, let's be real. 2 points separated these teams in the standings last year, so it could go either way. But that's why I have Edmonton number one. And Harper, I'm sure you have some of the same thoughts too.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, it obviously starts with the two horses up front, and McDavid and Draisaitl. And excuse me, you could tell that they were pissed off at the end of that second round series with Vegas after the loss. And I think that, it was more not discrediting Vegas at all, but I do feel like a good chunk of the reason why the Oilers lost that series was because they kind of lost themselves a little bit. And they kind of beat themselves. And so they're a good team. I just think that, McDavid and Draisaitl, who, by the way, we're seeing on social media that it looks like they've been training together all summer. Like they've been going together everywhere, the biosteel camps and all of that. So I just think that those two are going to come out like a house on fire. Yes, expecting some regression from guys like Nuge and some of the others. But, really like this team. They're a Stanley Cup contender. I do expect Campbell to bounce back, and for another guy like Bouchard to take another step forward and all of that. So no, I like Edmonton at number one in this division, and obviously the biggest reason is because of the two horses up front. And I just think that they were angry, they were defiant, they were frustrated at the end of that series with Vegas, and they're just going to come out like a house on fire and be dominant again this season. And I'll be watching for Connor Brown as well, because he's healthy now. Really tough year for him last year. He really didn't play at all, and he's looking to come out and prove himself, and he's going to get a great opportunity to do that with his old junior hockey buddy in McDavid. So yeah, all of those things kind of together make me want to pick Edmonton at number one.
I hear you with, having Evander Kane back and Connor Brown coming into the lineup. I did put down my player to watch as our NH because I'm curious to see if he can, I said if he can hit 100 points again, but if he comes even close, it's going to help the team drastically. But when you talk about regression, like I just see where Stuart Skinner might drop back a bit. Jack Campbell's it's going to equal out in the end. Same as the scoring, where we lose RNH's 100 points is going to be equaled out, or maybe slightly better with Evander Kane. Connor Brown's keeping up with Yamamoto or Klim Kostin, so like I don't see it drastically different. And then when I look at the back end, saying like I hope Philip Broberg takes the step because I like the player, but I don't want to I don't want to hold my hat on that,
Yeah, fair enough.
That's not necessarily where I want to put my money. When I look at Vegas's decor, I think that their fourth defenseman is as good as Darnell Nurse, or slightly close. And Braden McNabb, they play the same hockey game. Braden McNabb might punch a couple more people in the face, which may be even better. So if you don't agree with that, then Shea Theodore is better than Darnell Nurse. Pietrangelo is better than Darnell Nurse. So I'm not, you know what I mean? I just think their decor is so good. It's a couple guys who can really move the puck, and then four of them that play phenomenal defense. Alec Martinez blocks so many shots. I don't know how he still has a career at his age. And then Zach Whitecloud and Nicholas Hague, they're just hard to play against, this whole decor. I mean, in the end, I did say that I was willing to put any three team at the top, so I can concede here, but I just don't think that, considering Edmonton was behind them, despite it being a point last year, I don't know if they've made enough changes that's going to put them over the top.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we all agree that these are going to be two of the better teams in this division and the league as well. And, whoever finishes first or second, I don't think it's going to matter. I would probably still pick Vegas in a playoff series, but in the regular season with McDavid and Draisaitl, I think I have to go Edmonton. So I think that's what we're going to do, right? Edmonton number 1, Vegas number 2. Do we want to get into that 3 spot? Casey and I already mentioned who we had at 3. Yeah. So, Harb, how about you?
Yeah. Well, I think we've all got the same team at number 3, and that's the Los Angeles Kings. So let's talk about them.
Yeah, let's do it.
Case, you want to start talking about LA? I know that
sure.
You're a big Kopitar guy. You like the Kings, and they've taken some real steps forward here, and they made some big ads this offseason. They've really got no cap space left, so this is a big year for LA.
Yeah, I mean, they are my favorite team in the West, I'll say that, and they have been for, I don't know, over a decade now, and I'm really excited to see who they've brought in to this team. Sure, there's a lot of subtractions here, but I think that the scoring on this team is going to be just phenomenal. We already know what Kopitar can do. Adrian Kempe has proved that he is a 35-plus goal scorer every single year now, and Kevin Fiala, he is my player to watch on this team because he might be the next guy to join the 100-point club. He was so fun to watch last year, and if it wasn't for injuries, he was probably going to be around 90, 95 points. So, as the two studs on this team, Kopitar and Doughty, get older, they're going to start looking for who the next guy is, and I think Kevin Fiala is showing that he's going to be the next stud of this team. The D-core, they did, I think, patch some holes here. Sure, they had Sean Durzi leave, but I think they maybe needed a more defensive guy anyways. So they have a Gavrikov join the team. And then Brandt Clarke is going to be QB2 on the power play. So, that's really replacing Durzi. I'm really excited to see what Brandt Clarke can do in the NHL full time here. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch and maybe give up a lot of turnovers, but he's going to make up for it with some sick plays. Mikey Anderson just hits everything that moves, and we already know what Doughty can be. So I like the D-core. I love the offense, love the forwards, and that bottom 6, it's just like, it's filled with guys who are not only hard to play against, but also have a scoring touch and can put the puck in the net. And then it comes to goaltending. And that's why I did land at number 3 with these guys, comparing them to Vegas and Edmonton. Goaltending, they brought in Talbot to try to stop the bleeding that was last year. Phoenix Copley did have a good season numbers wise, but he's really an AHL guy. He's a third goalie in most rotations, so they needed to do something, and I'm not sure if Cam Talbot's going to be the guy. So I'm curious to see what happens here. All in all, though, this team had a fantastic power play last year, and the only guy that's left that power play really is Durzi, and I think Brandt Clarke can pick up after him, and then Dubois added to that is just, it's going to be great. I think that he's finally going to be happy. I mean, I hope he's finally happy, so I think we're going to see his best year yet, and it's really going to spur the Kings ahead.
Yeah, think about Kopitar, PLD, and Danault as your 1, 2, 3 center. That might be the best 3-headed monster down the middle in the entire league. It's there aren't many teams that can even compare to that. So center depth is going to be a massive benefit for them this season. I think their forwards got better because of that, obviously adding PLD. But then, maybe taking a little bit of stress off a guy like Quinton Byfield, who can now move over to the wing, play a less, defensive heavy role. Not that he was in that role beforehand, but just, let the kid play. Let him slide into the NHL comfortably and get some help around him. So I think that's going to be great for his development. On the back end, losing Durzi, yeah, that sucks. He's a good player. He's probably going to tear it up in Arizona. But, adding Gavrikov at the deadline, we kind of mocked it a bit because, we always said a team was going to overpay. Gavrikov doesn't do, that much aside from just playing shutdown D. But we were kind of proven wrong, and a lot of analysts were proven wrong. Like, Gavrikov was really, really solid in LA that back half of the season, and it turns out he was a really good fit there, so I really like that. And then in terms of goaltending, it could be the situation exactly like it was last year, where at the deadline they just go out and get somebody, you know, like their options were pretty limited after the season ended. You know, they could have re-signed Korpisalo and given him a ticket like he got in Ottawa, but at the same time, I don't blame them at all. Like, I don't want to pay any goalie if I'm a GM. So, I mean, listen, Copley and Talbot is not a great tandem. It might be one of the worst in the league. It's not good at all, especially on a contender. And that is same as you, Case, one of the only reasons I didn't put them in the 1 or 2 spot in this division. But at the end of the day, like we've sort of already realized, if you can outscore your problems in the regular season and then your goalie's hot in the playoffs, you can make it work and go on to win a cup. So I'm not overly concerned with that.
Yeah, exactly, and not much more I can really say. The goaltending is a concern, but I mean it is voodoo, as we've mentioned plenty of times. David Riddick they also added so he's a third goalie as well. You know, a little bit of insurance there, but yeah, I mean that 3-headed. Goalie carousel of Talbot, Copley, and Riddick isn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but with the forward group and on the back end, this team is pretty strong. And you mentioned the 3 guys that they have down the middle. I mean, that's just great to have. And as long as everybody can stay healthy, this team plays fast. They play hard. They've got guys like Trevor Moore and Lizotte and some of these others in the bottom 6, like you mentioned, Case, that have some snarl and they can put the puck in the back of the net. And Mikey Anderson, I think one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. And so, yeah, and Pierre-Luc Dubois as well. I mean, he gets that nice contract, and it looks like it's going to be the final stop for him. And so I expect him to come out and have a big year as well, because he is a good player at the end of the day and is really going to help the Kings. So yeah, this is a big year for them, and the question is, can they win a playoff round or two? Because we know that the rebuild's over, that they're a playoff team year in and year out, but can they really take that step forward and win a round or two this season? It'll be interesting to see, but they have certainly gotten better.
2 final thoughts on LA before we move on to 4 through 8. Number 1, Eric Portillo, the goalie from Buffalo that signed in LA.
Yep.
What's his future going to be like? Can he be the goalie of the future? Just a thought and question mark that I had about him. And number 2 is Alex Turcotte. I think this year could be the final year of, you know, seeing what he can do at the NHL level. He's barely played any games. We're getting closer and closer towards bust territory. So this might be the year for him to either play or maybe be traded and find a new destination. So those are just 2 thoughts I had in passing about this team. Yeah.
No, they're legitimate ones, that's for sure. All right, guys, let's move on to that 4th spot in this division. And I feel like, 4 to 6 was really tough. It was for me, at least, to determine where things are going to settle out. Kind of in that middle tier in this division. But I landed on the Seattle Kraken. How about you guys?
I did not.
Okay.
But I knew there was going to be disagreement at number 4 because, like you said, Harp, I have any one of these next 4 teams or 3 teams being just as good. So yeah, I'm totally willing. I'd shuffle the deck. I'd put in a random number generator and go ahead and pick that way because it could be anyone. But let's hear what you have to say about Seattle.
Yeah. Well, Chad, actually, why don't we go to you to start talking about the Kraken? You've got the ball cap on and everything, and so I would assume that Seattle is in the 4th spot for you.
Seattle is in the 4th spot for me, but it's not something I was certain about. You know, they're coming off a 100-point season where they had a ton of players score a ton of goals, and they scored the most goals above expected in the entire league. So it's one of those things where, you appreciate the depth scoring on this team, but at the same time, you're a little bit worried because some of those numbers are bound to regress. So in terms of their forward group, I think it is going to be about the same. They are going to have some players regress, like, maybe a guy like McCann regresses a bit. I don't know if he's going to be considered going forward as an elite player. Maybe that's a bad example, but there are a ton of players who scored a ton of goals on this team, and I just don't see that happening again this year. But at the same time, they added a guy like Kailer Yamamoto, they added a guy like Pierre-Edouard Bellemare to sort of round out the group, I think, and bring some different elements. So I think even though they might lose a little bit of scoring, I think their forward group is going to be just fine. Plus, they're going to be adding, hopefully, guys like Shane Wright for a full season, Cole Lind, who's been tearing up the American League. He was a point per game in the American League last year. And also, too, going back to last week's episode, that was a player who Kenny mentioned could be fantasy relevant this year, Cole Lind, just because of his point production at the league below. So, and then in terms of their defense, I think it was kind of the same thing. Like a guy like Vince Dunn might regress a bit after having an incredible year, but they added a guy like Brian Dumoulin, who I just think, again, just sort of rounds out the group. And then in terms of goaltending, they lost Martin Jones, who was actually their starter down the stretch. He played the most games of any goalie on this team last year, but he was also the guy with the worst goal saved above expected on this team. Philip Grubauer, still played a decent amount of games. He's going to be their go-to this year. If I told you I liked that, I would definitely be lying. And if I told you I liked their three guys, Grubauer, Decord, and Drieger, I would also be lying because I don't think goaltending is a strength of this team. But all of that considered, I think I could definitely see them getting to that 100-point mark again, or at least 95 plus, meaning that they're a playoff team. The only reason why I'm not certain that Seattle is in a perfect spot in that number 4 spot is because of teams like Calgary, Vancouver, and even Anaheim, who will be taking a step this year. So I landed at number 4 for Seattle. But I don't know. It's all sort of up in the air for me right now. This could be a year in the Pacific, because I think the Central might have gotten a little bit worse, where we do see 5 teams make the playoffs. Because when I think of Seattle in my head now, again, coming off a 100-point year, I think to me it just makes sense that although there will be some regression, I still see them as a playoff team, even if it's in a wildcard spot. So sorry, that was long-winded, but go ahead, Casey, on your thoughts on Seattle and maybe some of the other teams that you think fit that 4 spot better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely looked at this team, and first thing that came to my mind was regression, mostly because of their shooting percentage is like it's like 10.9% last year, which is not sustainable whatsoever. I think they did have a lot of depth scoring, and then that is always a variable. You're not always going to have your third line put up the same numbers as they did last year, same as the second line on this team. So I'm just curious to see where that will go. I'd like to see someone step up and be, star numbers, star scoring. Matty Beniers is probably going to be that guy. And then when you look at all these rookies coming in, it's like you're relying a lot on them when I look at this team. But there's also there's like 12 veterans on this team. You know what I mean? I'm counting Matty Beniers in there because he's played a full year, but I look at this team and I don't know who's going to step out for Shane Wright. Is it Kailer Yamamoto? I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks with this team, and when I start hearing question marks in my own head, I start second guessing a team, and I start thinking that, what's the locker room going to be like, and are people going to crack under pressure, or are they going to play better because of internal competition? I love internal competition, but it's a double-edged sword there. So I do actually like the decor of this team. I think they look hard to play against. When I look at them on paper, I'm like, I don't really want to try to score on this team. I think that everyone is fairly reliable in their own end, other than maybe Vince Dunn, but he is their point guy. He's their power play guy. He's their puck mover. So that's totally fine. I like the decor. hate the goaltending.
Same.
I mean, how long have we been saying, like all 3 years, we're saying that the goaltending should be better. I think we're at the point where it's not as much voodoo with Drieger and Grubauer anymore as it is. They just aren't the guys they used to be. And I'm not really looking for them to be better anymore. I'd love to see it for their sake, but I've just kind of given up on this team and goaltending at the moment until they find someone else. So I just felt like maybe I'm looking for question marks and problems with this team because I've historically not been a Seattle Kraken fan, but I just looked at the other teams and I liked one more than them. I did land at 5 for Seattle, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was a playoff spot in this West Conference.
Yeah, I figured that you landed at 5, and I can guess who is at the 4 spot for you, but I won't spoil it because Harper wants to chime in on Seattle.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it quick on the Kraken. Obviously, don't like the goaltending. I mean, Joey Decord is another guy who ripped it up in Coachella Valley in the AHL this past year. They went all the way to the Calder Cup Finals, of course, and had a great team. And so he'll certainly get a shot. We don't know if Chris Drieger is going to be healthy and ready to go. I don't think yet. So they do have an insurance option there in net, but it's obviously not a great 3 guys there. And then this team is just, they're one of those classic teams that just gets it done by committee. Everyone chips in up front, on the back end. Dave Haxtell does a great job, and I don't see this team taking a step backwards. I think they're a playoff team again, wild card, at the 4th or 5th spot. I've got them in 4th, but it's going to be really close between 4 and 6. But with the year that Seattle had, I think there's a bit of recency bias there, and certainly you expect a little bit of regression, but this team just gets it done by committee, and they're a lot of fun to watch, and Matty Beniers is going to take another step forward and become an elite player sooner rather than later. So I like the Kraken in that 4 spot, but it's close.
Yeah, I remember last year, I actually listened to our season preview episode for the Pacific earlier today just to see where we were at last year. And we landed on Seattle at 6, but I made a comment saying I wouldn't be surprised if they were a bubble playoff team, and got absolutely shredded on Instagram for posting that. So I think they're kind of in the same place again this year. I think they will be a bubble playoff team. Maybe they've taken a bit of a step, compared to how they were going into last season. But I think between the, even 3 to 6 spot, anywhere in there, I wouldn't be shocked, just because this division is really wide open. Like a team like Calgary had a down year last year. They could be really good this year. We picked them to win the division last year, by the way. Just wanted to share that, and they missed the playoffs, so that was tough. And a team like Vancouver, same thing. They could be great this year, and kind of who knows. So that's why I think Casey mentioned off the top why this division is so difficult and exciting actually to talk about for once, just because it's so close. So Seattle at number 4. Yeah. Seattle at number 4, I think, it's 2v1, but it's not a hard 2v1. It's a very wishy-washy one.
Dude, I'm fine with putting them at 4. It's not so much about Seattle taking a step back for me. It's about another team taking a major leap forward. And I just really wanted this on record for me saying that this team is going to come 4th. I really do think Seattle is still a playoff team, and I think that the Pacific's probably going to have a wild card, or maybe both. We'll see. But frankly, guys, I have the Vancouver Canucks in the number 4 spot. Wow. I think at the end of the season, they had embers. There were embers in there. And I think there's going to be some gasoline dumped on that at the start of this season. It was annoying to see them catch embers at the end of the year and turn things around, because it's like, hey guys, Connor Bedard, would you like him? Maybe continue to suck. But I think we saw some major leap forwards for a few players on this team, and there's so many of them that are just on the precipice of being studs, and it's just like, we just need them. We need half of them to take that step, and this team is going to be a hard to deal with. When I look at their forward setup, I really love it top to bottom. I like how this team's shaped out. Their 2 adds down the middle are going to help this team tremendously. And Elias Pettersson is going to be my player to watch this season because he will score 110 points, no problem. It's his career, it's his last year on the contract, and he is going to be playing lights out. He already did last year. He hit 100 points last year, and he's going to push even harder this year. I'm so excited to watch him. There's so many guys on this team that could just take one more step and make this team a powerhouse. And Kuzmenko and Besser finally maybe can get back to being a 30-goal scorer if he could stay healthy. And, Connor Garland, is he the guy he used to be? Vasily Podkolzin, we want him to take a step finally. What's that? I just blanked on his name. He's been up and down between the AHL and Vancouver.
Nils Hoglander.
Yeah, I would like to see him stay in the NHL this year. I think he's got a lot to prove. JT Miller, we want him to be JT Miller of 2 years ago. Quinn Hughes is an absolute stud. Can't wait for his contract to be over so he can play for the New Jersey Devils. And then they've plugged the holes on the D-core and not just like put some tape on it. It's Flex Seal. They put Flex Seal on this D-core with Carson Soucy and Ian Cole. I think the upgrade from Dermott and Bear, or Dermott and I guess it was Burrows, OEL. The upgrade from them to Ian Cole and Carson Soucy is great, in my opinion. I really like it. I think they could probably still use one more D-man. Phil Hronek is one of my favorite players in the league, so I might be a little biased on that point. And then goaltending is just another case of what's Thatcher Demko going to be this season? And I think that he's going to take a major step forward. He's going to have a bounce back year. We already started seeing glimpses of it before, but I think he's still like a top 10 goalie in the league. And if they can get that out of him and, have him playing 50, 55 games, then I think this team's in good hands in net. So there's a lot to like about Vancouver, but I'm also wouldn't be surprised if they were 6th in this division, because Vancouver, we're always waiting for them to be better. They're, no offense, Harp, they're the Buffalo Sabres of the West. It's like, this is their year. This is their year. Well, maybe get Connor Bedard. Like, holy shit. So I'm excited for this year. I am a bit of a Vancouver stan, so, grain of salt, but I like this team.
Yeah. So do you think they make the playoffs in the number 5 spot, Case?
Well, I have them in 4 and making the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
But you guys have vetoed that. So I just, again, clip that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't have a problem with Vancouver being in our collective 5 spot. I had them at 6, but again, very flexible in terms of these rankings. No Bo Horvat for this season, which, that's a big loss for them. But Anthony Beauvillier was great down the stretch for them after coming over from the island, replaced some of the scoring that they lost in Horvat. Pui Suter is a guy who's going to get some additional ice time on this team. Ideally, at some point, they'll have Ilya Mikheyev back, fully healthy, so that will be a nice add for them. A guy like Teddy Bluger to round out the bottom 6. I don't mind their forward group at all. I think it's better built than it was in the past. And like you mentioned, with Elias Pettersson going into his final year of his contract, I think not only will he be playing for a new contract, to try to cash in and make as much money as possible, but I think the team around him knows that they're going to be playing to keep him in Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. And I wrote that in my player to watch section. Like I wrote, his production this year is going to push the team over the top, because they have to play well, because they need him to stick around long term.
Yeah. And listen, say what you will about what management has done in Vancouver, the OEL that whole fiasco was just something that didn't work. There's been a ton of those moves, right, that just haven't worked, and all of the bad money on the books and taking on bad money and trading away bad money. It's just been a bit of a fiasco. But Case, like you mentioned, now when you look at the back end and you have a guy like Carson Soucy to sort of man that second pairing and be a shutdown presence, and then you have an Ian Cole on the third pairing, tough to play against, tons of experience to mentor other guys, a Philip Hronek now to bring some more offense and just be a bit of a steady presence, even though, you know, at the time we didn't love the trade. It seemed like a lot to give up and we didn't really know the direction of the team. When you look at it on paper, this team is going to be, or they at least should be, pretty good. And they have their coach now, which was a problem in the past. All of that instability, especially the last 2 weeks of Bruce Boudreau, that was an absolute nightmare in Vancouver. But, now that they've got their coach, they've got their core, they've committed to their core, and hopefully they can get Pettersson done sooner rather than later. I don't mind the pick for Vancouver being a playoff team, so I'm more than happy to put them in the 5 spot in our consensus rankings.
Yeah, I am too. And Case, I think you made some great points. I think that Elias Pettersson is going to come out like a house on fire. Again, my favorite term or saying on this podcast, it seems. I used it for McDavid and Draisaitl earlier. I think the same for Pettersson. He is a superstar now in the NHL, and that really was solidified last season. He is going to get paid, all caps, with his next deal with Vancouver, and they have to do everything they can to keep him happy. I like the forward group. You've got good players in the bottom 6 like Bluger. Dakota Joshua is another guy that we didn't mention, but he fit in really well in the bottom 6. And looking at the way that this team played down the stretch under Rick Tocchet, 20-12-4 was their record. And so when you look at that and the way that they played down the stretch in that second half of the season, in theory, this team should be a playoff team. And, rightly or wrongly, that's what they're going for. But I think it is the right decision because you've got Pettersson in a contract year. He's going to have a huge year. You got to keep Quinn Hughes happy as well. Thatcher Demko, he's one of those guys that, if he can get back to the Demko of a few years ago, he could really steal a lot of games for you and potentially, go on a lead you on a playoff run as well. If they were able to just get in, I feel like they're one of those teams that's like, you know what, if we've got the goaltender and with some of the pieces that we have, we just need to squeak in and we could potentially go on a run. So I'm fine with, I can see the rationale for 4, but I'll go with 5. Happy with that because I could see 5 teams making the playoffs from this division. So the more I think about it, the more I kind of like what Vancouver has done here, and they've certainly plugged some holes.
My only problem with it, and I'm sure you guys kind of thought about the same thing when you were putting together your own rankings, is that leaves out a team like Calgary, who we're expecting to bounce back, or a lot of people are expecting to bounce back. So that means that, I'm assuming, unless one of you wants to put Anaheim or San Jose in that 6 spot, that means Calgary is going to go number 6. So, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That's where I had them, was 6. And again, wouldn't be surprised if they're 4th in this division. There's a lot of guys who can have bounce back seasons. Their subtractions of this team kind of worry me a little bit. Like Tyler Toffoli was their best player last year. Lewis was a good bottom 6 guy, and I don't know if they're going to miss Lucic, but we'll see. But there was one subtraction that was very good for this team, and that was their coach. And I think that is going to be a huge turning point for this team. But what that does create in my mind is early season jitters or early season issues with the new coaching staff coming in, and a team that, has it in their head when they're going into the season, I've got to be better this year. I've got to be Jonathan Huberdeau of the year prior. I've got to be Nazem Kadri of the year in Colorado. I've got to be better. Like, all of these players have that in their mind, and that's going to be tough going into this season, especially with a new coach. So I think the first 2 months are going to be shit. And that's what I was really worried about when I looked at this team in the rankings. I think that down the stretch, this team could be really good, and I'm interested to see what they can do. Again, a lot of guys that need to turn things around, but I love the D-core. Always have loved Calgary's defense. For the last 10 years, they've had good defense. And then goaltending, like Markstrom used to be one of the best goalies in the league. He's got a fantastic contract. So if he can get back to that level, that'd be great. But man, they've got 3 good goalies. So we'll see which one of them really takes the reins here. But for me, Markstrom's got to be the guy again. This team should be able to score a lot, but again, they're missing Toffoli. They brought in Sharangovich to replace him. Don't know if he's that guy. So it's just a ton of question marks. I think it's going to be a rocky start to the season, and that's why I had them behind Vancouver and Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different look team this year, subtracting Toffoli, adding a Sharangovich. But different look just in the sense that I think they got a bit younger and faster too. Guys like Jacob Peltier going to be able to play ideally a full season with a coach who knows his name and what number he wears. So that will be nice. And then Matt Coronado as well. I think both of those guys will inject some speed and some life into that lineup and hopefully provide some depth scoring. And then the back end remains exactly the same. Case, you mentioned it, top 10 back end in the league, maybe top 5. Like it's really good, despite what you think of some of the contracts. And then in net, 3 good goalies. I have a feeling Vladar is probably going to go out the door at some point because Dustin Wolf is, one of the best, if not the best, goaltending prospect right now in terms of both his ceiling and just how good he is right now. He's been tearing up the American League. So he's going to get a legit shot this year. And I don't know if he's waiver exempt still. If he is, that would be perfect. It would be a situation kind of like in Carolina where they have 3 guys and Kochetkov is the 3rd guy and he's waiver exempt, so he's able to go up and down. But I think the goaltending will be fine. I don't anticipate Markstrom being as bad as he was last year because I do think that he's still the starter. But the backup position could be dicey in a good way with a little bit of internal competition. But yeah, just looking at this team, like it's hard to imagine them finishing in the 6th spot because I think all signs point to them having a bounce back year from guys like Huberdeau, Kadri, and even some guys on the back end too. But at the same time, this division is going to be so complicated and it's going to be so tough to predict, I think, even at the midway point of the season. So I could see them finishing number 6. Could also see them winning the division. I don't think that's crazy to say. Like I don't think Edmonton, LA, Vegas have a lock on those top 3 spots. So again, like that's why this division is fun to talk about this year.
Well, they've got a lot of guys playing contract years this year, and that could lead to them overperforming like unbelievably. But I was thinking that if this team is not a playoff team come the trade deadline, they're going to be the most interesting ones to watch by far. You can see Backlund get traded. You can see Lindholm get traded. And then basically everyone on defense.
Yeah.
Hanifin is up and Tanev is up and Zadorov is up. So it's going to be a pure chaos, I think, if this team is not a playoff team come the trade deadline.
Oh, I hope, honestly, for Toronto's sake, that they're out of it so that Brad Treliving can go to their D-core and just pick the piece he wants. Whoever it is on an expiring contract, come on over to the Maple Leafs because their D-core is solid, man.
It is. And, for Calgary, I think that they are the NHL's wild card team this season. Like, we don't know what to expect. We all, think that they should have a bounce back year for sure. They definitely underachieved. It was certainly a disaster with the coach that they had there, Old Man River and Daryl Sutter. But this team just needs to go out. They need to just have a quiet year. They need to have fun and just play hockey. And I feel like that the culture is already getting back to being better with Craig Conroy now as the GM and Ryan Huska taking over as the head coach. Mark Savard was also added to the coaching staff. I don't know if you guys knew that, but he's a very smart hockey mind and was a great player. So curious to see how he helps the offensive aspect of the game with this team. But yeah, they need to have some younger players be injected into the lineup and provide some life. And I feel like the Peltiers, the Coronados, the Walker Dewars of the world, those guys will certainly do that. Looking at the back end, I love a player like Rasmus Andersson. I feel like he doesn't get enough respect that he deserves as one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. And the way that he has been talking about the team going into this season, they recognize that a lot of people are doubting them after last year, but they're prepared to just go out and have a fun season and just kind of shut out a lot of that noise that's been around the team for this last year and a bit. So I could see Calgary finishing third. I could see them finishing sixth in this division. Anywhere in there, I've got the Calgary Flames, but it's going to be interesting. And I agree, at the trade deadline, if they're out of it, they could be kingmakers for sure, and it could get real interesting in Calgary. So, but yeah, I guess for the sake of where do we put them for our rankings here, I guess we've got to put them at sixth, but could see them finishing as high as third.
Yeah, so I think that caps off the second tier of this division. Let's get into the third tier now, and I think there's two teams probably in the order we all have. I think it's probably the same, but let's get into Anaheim and San Jose to wrap up this podcast.
Yep. Case, you want to start by talking about the Ducks?
Sure, yeah, I do have Anaheim at number 7. I think this team could even be better, but it's just rolling the die this year. That's how I see this team. There's a lot of young players, and it's going to be interesting to see what they can do. They're going to look to have guys like Trevor Zegras and Mason McTavish and Leo Carlsson lead this team in scoring, and we just don't know what that outcome is, and that's why I have them low, is because it's just anything could happen with this team. They're very young. They're going to take a step this year, but they're in a tough division now. So I don't have them much higher than 7. But again, wouldn't be shocked. I guess maybe that's just what we keep saying because we don't want to look like assholes down the road. But, it was interesting that they added some veterans into this team because you do need guys to lead the young kids into the future and then teach them the ways. But the scoring is going to come from youth, and Troy Terry living up to his contract is important. We'll see what happens there. But when I look at the back end, this team isn't looking very good. I like the top pair, and then from there on, it's not great. And that is going to lead to a very tough time for John Gibson once again, and he's used to that. So I don't even feel bad for him anymore. It's just like, yep, John Gibson is going to see a lot of shots. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about the team. I don't have much to say about either Anaheim or San Jose.
Yeah, well, I actually think, Case, that they got better on defense a little bit, but also, of course, at forward. And I think they also got better between the pipes. So at all 3 positions, I think they got a little bit better. Just how much better, I mean, that remains to be seen. We'll see how big that step is that they take, because I think we're all in agreement that they will be taking a step. But,
yeah, well, I mean, they can't go backwards.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. But, up front, adding a guy like Killorn, I think makes a ton of sense. We talked about that after he signed his contract. Makes a ton of sense to mentor some of the younger guys there. Adding Carlsson, who they clearly really wanted with that number 2 pick, made so much sense. Makes so much sense to add him to the group as soon as possible. I think he's a player who is truly ready to play. Zegras, how much more does he have offensively? Can he be a 90-point player one day? And will that be this year? Same with Mason McTavish. Can he be a 60 to 80-point player? And can that be this year? So, both of those guys are expected to break out. Same with on the back end. Jamie Drysdale expected to break out this year. And I think they've sort of surrounded him on the back end a little bit better going forward. You don't have a guy like John Klingberg anymore who, at the time made sense to add to that team as an experienced veteran to mentor some of the other guys. But now, not only are you getting mentorship, but you're actually protecting some of your younger, better players by adding guys like Gudas and Lyubushkin, two hard-hitting, hard-nosed defensemen who, know the other side of the game, as opposed to Drysdale, who knows the offensive side of the game better. And then in terms of goaltending, John Gibson hasn't been elite in a few years, though he has the skill set. He's been in a tough situation, obviously, right? But now they have Stalock, who they had last year, but also Lucas Dostal. We'll see if he comes up and plays some games, and they'll see what they have in him. So I think they got better at every position. I think the question mark is just by how much. But yeah, number 7 makes a ton of sense for Anaheim.
Yeah. I kind of look at the Ducks and, I kind of look at them as taking the step that Arizona took last season, 70 points. I think that would be fair potentially for this team. Lots of great young talent. And I think for them, it's just, take a step forward. Obviously, you don't want to take a step backwards. Get another high pick and then, start to be competitive next season and play meaningful games after the deadline. And that I think is a real possibility. But yeah, just take another step forward, which they will. I think it'll be growth from their young players that we mentioned. Love the pick of Leo Carlsson and and just take a step forward and get another high pick at the end of the day.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the San Jose Sharks, and of course they made big headlines this offseason by finally trading Erik Karlsson. He moves on, of course. It didn't make sense for him to stay there, but they finally got it done. They got Will Smith at the draft. This is a team that's we think they're rebuilding, although some of their moves say otherwise. Sharks at number 8. What do we have to say about San Jose to wrap it up?
Yeah, this team is basically a new team coming into the season. There's so many additions and subtractions, mostly all from the Erik Karlsson trade, but I mean, there was more there as well, adding Anthony Duclair. We talked about these guys when we were talking about the offseason moves and the Karlsson trade, and they're going to be a team that can steal random wins because they've got some guys who can put the puck in the net on occasion. So I think they're going to steal more wins than maybe they want to, but I definitely have this team at 8. It was my only lock in this division ranking. I wrote it in first. I'm not a huge fan of their decor. I think they lack a 1, 3, and 4 defenseman. I put Ferraro as a number 2, and that's where I'm at with that team. So, or with that decor. And then in the goaltending department, it was bad last year, so it can only get better, I think. And I have Mackenzie Blackwood as my player to watch because I'm just going to be curious on what he can do with his health if he stays healthy, and he's going to get the starting time. And I think that there's something in him if he can stay healthy. There is that goalie in him. He was very good in the past for the Devils when he was healthy, ran into a ton of injuries and then got kind of replaced. So curious to see what he can do. I did forget to mention my players to watch from the others, so I'll just blast them out. Leo Carlsson for obvious reasons, Huberdeau for obvious reasons, and Shane Wright for the same as Leo Carlsson. So that's that. Chad, what do you have to say about San Jose?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It's going to be a weird season for this team. We talked about it a couple episodes ago when we were talking about the Erik Karlsson trade and the offseason. Their defense clearly got way worse, trading Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns even last year. They don't have anybody back there aside from Ferraro, so that to me, looks like a team that's rebuilding that decor anyway. And then up front, they arguably got better. They added so many guys who can actually score. It's so weird. I have written in my notes, they added so many players who can score but don't know how to play defense. And then I listed Mikael Granlund, Mike Hoffman, Anthony Duclair, Zetterlund, and Zadina. All of these players, are sort of struggling, I would say, on their previous teams, aside from a guy like Duclair, who was more of a cap casualty. And of course, Zetterlund was included in that trade. I'm pretty sure the Meyer trade, right? Zetterlund was the piece in that.
That's right.
But those other guys, Granlund, Hoffman, Zadina, like struggling on their previous teams, they're going to get a bigger opportunity on this team to score goals, which means they're going to be also hungry to score goals, especially a guy like Zadina. So you're right. Like they could win a lot of games here. 6-5, like 7-6, because their back end isn't great. I don't love the goaltending tandem of Kähkönen and Blackwood. I think Blackwood's a good goalie, but health is obviously a big concern. So yeah, we'll see. We think they're a rebuilding team, but they're going to be able to steal a lot of games just given the fact that they have players who can score but can't play defense. So weird team, but number 8 makes the most sense.
Yeah, definitely. And for these guys, I think it's just important to, get another high pick and slowly continue to build up that prospect pool, which already, looking at it, is starting to get pretty good with Will Smith added to that from this year, Eklund, Bordeleau, Quentin Musty, who they also got later in the first round this year. So slowly they're starting to build it up. And this team just, they're going to be competitive. I think clearly with some of the guys that they brought in, they're going to be able to compete on a lot of nights and steal some games and have that high flying offense on some nights. Really interested to watch a guy like Zadina because it didn't work out for him in Detroit. He was a high pick. He's ran into injuries, and listening to the 32 Thoughts interview with him today, he sounds very excited about coming to San Jose and having this opportunity, and he's going to get a good one. So, it's going to be an interesting team to watch, and so I think just for them, compete, take a step and then get a high pick and draft a defenseman. And there are a lot of good defensemen available in this next draft, by the way, as well. So, yeah, that's really all I have on San Jose, but I think at the bottom of this division makes the most sense.
Yeah, like Casey said, the only real lock, because they're the only team that is, I would say, still fully committed to a rebuild. Even a team like Anaheim is not trying to compete right away, but they're moving in the other direction. They're getting better. Whereas San Jose, I think, even though we said that their forward group might have got a bit better, I think generally they're trying to get worse so they can rebuild.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right, boys. Well, there we have it. That's a wrap on our predictions for the Pacific Division. Next week, we're going to come back on and chat about the Central to wrap up the Western Conference. So again, hope everybody out there had a terrific summer, and it's great to be back into Hockey Talk and doing our division previews. So thanks so much for listening to episode 180, and we'll chat with you again next week.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details. And don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at patreon.com/boysinthebooth.